Have you ever wondered why some countries are rich and others poor? Why the world economic landscape appears so uneven? It's a question that has puzzled many and led to the development of theories that seek to understand these disparities. One such theory is the world systems theory, introduced by American sociologist Immanuel Wallerstein. What if we told you that these disparities are not accidental, but a result of a global system? Welcome to the world of world systems theory. World systems theory, propounded by Immanuel Wallerstein, offers a unique perspective on the world as we know it. But who is Wallerstein and what exactly is this theory all about? Immanuel Wallerstein, a distinguished American sociologist, first introduced the world systems theory back in the 1970s. His groundbreaking perspective reshaped the way we view global economic and political order. Instead of seeing the world as a jumble of separate nations, Wallerstein proposed that the world is a single, interconnected system of economic and political relationships. The theory suggests that different parts of the world are integrated into a global structure, and changes in one area can have significant effects on others. So, if you think of the world as a giant web, every thread is connected and a tug on one can cause ripples throughout the entire web. Now, this doesn't mean that all parts of the world are equal, far from it. Wallerstein divided the world into three main zones: the core, the periphery, and the semi-periphery. The core includes wealthy, industrialized nations that hold sway over the global economic and political systems. The periphery, on the other hand, consists of less developed nations that are economically dependent on the core. The semi-periphery represents countries that fall somewhere in between. At the heart of Wallerstein's theory is the concept of a capitalist world economy, where the primary focus is on the accumulation of capital and the pursuit of profit. He argued that capitalism is the driving force behind the modern global system, shaping the dynamics of power and dependency between nations. World systems theory places a strong emphasis on historical development, tracing the evolution of the global system from as far back as the 16th century. It also highlights the uneven development of nations within the global system, attributing this to the unequal distribution of wealth, resources, and power. In simpler terms, Wallerstein sees the world as a single, interconnected entity rather than isolated countries. Imagine the world divided into three zones: the core, the periphery, and the semi-periphery. It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? Let's dive into it. The core represents the wealthiest, most industrialized countries. They exhibit high levels of manufacturing and generate a significant portion of the world's wealth. With their robust economies, these nations sit at the helm of global economic and political systems, often setting the rules of the game. The United States, Germany, and Japan are typical examples of core nations. Next, we have the periphery. These are less developed nations, often rich in natural resources but lacking in industrialization and economic stability. The periphery is economically dependent on the core, exporting raw materials and importing manufactured goods. Countries in Africa, parts of Asia, and Latin America often fall into this category. And then, there's the semi-periphery, a zone that bridges the gap between the core and the periphery. These are nations on the rise, experiencing significant economic growth and industrialization. They're not quite as influential as the core, but they're not as dependent as the periphery either. Think of countries like Brazil, India, and China, which are making substantial strides on the global stage. Now, these zones aren't isolated, they're deeply interconnected, each influencing and being influenced by the others. Core nations rely on the periphery for resources and cheap labor, driving their industrial machines. The periphery, in turn, depends on the core for capital and technology. The semi-periphery acts as a buffer, absorbing economic shocks and helping to maintain stability in the world system. So, what does this all mean? Well, it's a way of understanding the world's economic and political structure. It's a way of seeing how wealth, power, and resources are distributed and how nations are interconnected in the global economy. These zones, though different, are all cogs in the same machine, each playing a vital role in the world economy. At the heart of this theory lies the capitalist world economy. It's a sprawling web of transactions and relationships fueled by the relentless pursuit of capital and profit. Now, let's take a moment to understand what this means. Capitalism, as we know, is an economic system characterized by private ownership and the drive to generate profit. And in Wallerstein's world systems theory, capitalism isn't just a part of the system, it's the glue that holds it all together. It's the driving force that shapes our global economy and political landscape. In this global capitalist system, nations are not isolated entities. They're like gears in a larger machine, each performing a specific role, each contributing to the overall function. The core countries, with their industrial might and financial power, control the means of production, dominating global trade and dictating the rules of the game. Meanwhile, the periphery and semi-periphery nations, often abundant in resources but lacking in industrial capacity, find themselves in a somewhat dependent relationship. They provide raw materials and labor, often at the mercy of market forces heavily influenced by the core. But it's not just about wealth extraction, it's about the flow of capital, the generation of profit. It's about how the pursuit of wealth influences policies, fuels innovation, and shapes societies. It's about understanding that our world is not just a collection of separate economies, but a single, interconnected system shaped by the dynamics of capitalism. Thus, the quest for capital and profit is the engine that powers this entire system. The world system is not without its dark side, which manifests as dependency and exploitation. This stark reality is a central tenet of Wallerstein's world systems theory. The interconnected network of nations may seem harmonious at first glance, but beneath the surface there lies a complex web of economic and political relationships that often lead to exploitation. The core nations, with their wealth and industrial might, often exploit the resources and labor of the periphery and semi-periphery nations. This exploitation is not just a byproduct of the system, it is the very mechanism that allows the core nations to maintain their wealth and dominance. Think of it as a sort of global tug-of-war, where the core nations continue to pull resources towards themselves, leaving the periphery and semi-periphery nations in a state of constant struggle. This exploitation often manifests in the form of unfair trade practices, labor exploitation, and the extraction of natural resources. Wealthy core nations may impose tariffs or trade barriers that favor their own industries, making it difficult for periphery nations to compete on an equal footing. They may also exploit cheap labor in these nations, paying low wages for work that would command higher pay in the core. Furthermore, core nations often extract valuable natural resources from periphery nations, leaving these countries with environmental degradation and a depleted natural wealth. This pattern of exploitation contributes significantly to global inequality. While the core nations continue to amass wealth and power, the periphery and semi-periphery nations often remain trapped in a cycle of poverty and underdevelopment. This inequality is not a bug in the system, it's a feature. It's the outcome of a world system designed to perpetuate the dominance of the core at the expense of the periphery and semi-periphery. So, beneath the veneer of a unified global system, we find a harsh reality of dependency and exploitation. The prosperity of the core nations is often built on the struggles of the periphery and semi-periphery. The world system, therefore, is a complex web of dependency and exploitation. It's a sobering perspective indeed, but it's one that offers crucial insights into the workings of our interconnected world. To make sense of this complex system, scholars use a tool called world systems analysis. World systems analysis is like a global detective, piecing together the intricate puzzle of our interconnected world. It's a critical approach that allows us to understand the ripple effects of changes within the global system. Picture a vast spider web where a tremor in one strand can cause the entire web to shudder. In much the same way, world systems analysis helps us visualize how economic, political, or social shifts in one part of the world can reverberate through the entire system. This method of analysis is not just about understanding the present, but also about understanding the past and predicting the future. By tracing the historical development of the world system, it provides insights into how past events have shaped the current global landscape. And by looking at current trends, it can offer predictions about the future trajectory of the world system. Think about the global economic crisis of 2008. Through the lens of world systems analysis, we can see how the collapse of the housing market in the United States sent shockwaves through the global economy, affecting countries from Iceland to China. This analysis helps us understand how closely tied together the world's economies are, and how a crisis in one country can quickly become a global problem. World systems analysis also illuminates the power dynamics within the global system. It helps us see how the core countries maintain their dominance, and how their actions can impact the periphery and semi-periphery. It shows us the ways in which wealth, resources, and power are distributed unevenly across the world, and how this inequality shapes the trajectory of nations. In essence, world systems analysis is like a magnifying glass, bringing into focus the intricate workings of the global system. It helps us understand the interconnectedness of the world, the uneven distribution of power and resources, and the complex dynamics that drive the global system. World systems analysis, thus, gives us a lens to understand the complexities of our interconnected world.